I'm Rachel Sterling, 32, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Claire's engagement dinner. Elegant, perfect, dripping in champagne and expectations. I spent the better part of 2 weeks drafting a toast. Not just any toast. Something heartfelt, something that might finally remind my family that I existed outside the shadow of my younger sister. But the minute I walked into that restaurant, I knew it was already a lost cause. The private room glowed in gold tones and white linen, soft candlelight flickering over crystal glasses and perfect people. Claire looked radiant, of course, our very own golden girl. Her ring caught the light every time she moved, and Evelyn, our mother, never stopped commenting on it. 3 carats, impeccable clarity. Just like Claire. So brilliant, so refined. I sat at the long table, fourth seat from the end, hands folded around my water glass while Evelyn gave her opening remarks. She didn't use notes, she never needed them. Her compliments for Claire bordered on worship. Not only beautiful but accomplished, a senior analyst before 30. Such poise, such drive. Then, turning slightly, her eyes flicking to me, she added with a smile too sharp to be kind. And of course, Rachel's here too, taking time off from your design thing, right? Still working on logos and such? There was laughter. Not cruel, not overt. Just enough to make me feel 12 again, sitting at the kids' table, praying someone would ask me about my art portfolio instead of Claire's SAT scores. I smiled. I always smile. It's like armor now. Claire leaned over, whispering, "Mom doesn't mean anything by it," like she hadn't just sat there and let Evelyn slice me open with a sentence. I nodded. Swallowed the bitterness. Watched the waiters bring out duck confit and talk of wedding venues start swirling like smoke. Then Evelyn tapped her glass. "Rachel wanted to say a few words, didn't you, darling?" Her voice sweet, her gaze pointed. And everyone turned. My heart hammered. I reached into my bag for the folded paper I had rewritten 6 times. The one that started with "Claire, you've always been light," and ended with, "I'm proud to be your sister." I stood. The room quieted. I opened my mouth. Nothing came. Evelyn's lips curved, expectant. Claire tilted her head, waiting. I looked at the paper. Then at them. And suddenly, it felt like none of it mattered. Not the words, not the effort, not me. So I placed the speech gently on the empty chair beside me, tucked my clutch under my arm, and walked out of the room. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't offer explanations. I didn't cry until I hit the corner of the street. Behind me, the sound of silence bloomed. A silence louder than applause, heavier than Evelyn's praise, more honest than any toast I could have given. The chair stayed empty. Just like always. The city never sleeps, but it doesn't care if you've just walked out of your sister's engagement dinner with mascara running down your face. My heels clicked on the wet pavement, the rain indifferent, like my absence from that dinner table didn't matter. Because it didn't. Not to Evelyn. Not to Claire. Probably not even to the waiter who cleared my untouched plate after I left. By the time I reached my apartment, my curls had flattened and my navy dress clung to my thighs. I kicked off my shoes by the door and dropped my clutch on the entry table like it owed me money. I should have gone straight to bed. Instead, I poured a glass of cheap Merlot and sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in my own life. The silence was deafening. No text from Claire, no call from Evelyn, not even a pity emoji from my cousin. I pulled the folded speech out of my bag. It had gotten damp, the ink bleeding slightly. Funny. The one time I tried to speak up, the words ended up crumpled in my purse like they belonged there. I started replaying the evening, beat for humiliating beat. Evelyn's voice echoed in my head. "Your design thing," like it was a phase or a coloring book. I'd spent the last 5 years running branding for indie restaurants, nonprofits, small fashion houses. No, I wasn't a surgeon or a CPA, but I created things. Things that made people feel something. I didn't wear a title that sounded impressive at dinner parties. I wore exhaustion, pride, doubt, all stitched together into a life that was mine. But that's the problem. It was always just mine. My life didn't fit into Evelyn's curated image of family success. She wanted daughters who were reflections, mirrors of her ambition, her social standing. Claire? She was the prize, I was the packaging, and I played along. God, I always played along. Every family trip? I planned it. Claire's homework crisis junior year? I stayed up diagramming Hamlet while Evelyn booked flights to Napa. I took the late train home every Thanksgiving so Claire could have the car. I designed the invites for every shower, birthday, retirement brunch. I was the glue, the planner, the steady hand, but never the center. Not once did anyone ask what I needed. I stared at the wine in my glass, swirling it slowly. Was this all I was going to be? The sister who makes the place cards but doesn't get a place? My eyes drifted to the corkboard above my desk. Photos of old campaigns, color swatches, scribbled ideas for a children's book I'd shelved a year ago. Things I loved before I started shrinking to fit the shape Evelyn needed me to be. I was always the helper. The backdrop. The silent one. And now the silence was swallowing me whole. It was past midnight, but sleep wasn't coming. I sat cross-legged on my bed, phone clutched in one hand, Evelyn's number hovering on the screen like a dare. I stared at it for 20 minutes before finally pressing call. Part of me hoped she wouldn't pick up. Part of me needed her to. She answered on the third ring, voice chipper like nothing had happened. "Rachel, sweetheart, everything okay?" I almost hung up. I left my speech on the chair, I said, skipping the pleasantries. There was a pause. "Oh," she replied, drawing out the word like she wasn't sure what it meant. "Well, the dinner was lovely, wasn't it?" Claire looked radiant. "She did," I murmured. "But I left. I walked out, no one came after me." Another beat. "Well, you've always been a bit sensitive, darling. I assumed you just needed a moment. Honestly, you know how these events are. So many emotions, all eyes on Claire, understandably." That word. Understandably. Like my invisibility was natural, expected. "You called my career a hobby job," I said, voice rising despite myself, in front of everyone. "I didn't say that," she countered, tone cooling. "I was making conversation. People don't want to hear about branding strategies over foie gras." It was Claire's night. "Exactly," I snapped. "It's always Claire's night." Silence. I swallowed hard, eyes stinging. Do you have any idea how small I felt sitting there? How many times I've done the work behind the scenes and never once been seen? Evelyn sighed, like I was being exhausting. "Rachel. Families are messy, you know how it is. We all have roles. Claire's the achiever, you're the creative. That doesn't mean you're less important." "Then why do I feel like a ghost every time we're in the same room?" There it was, the truth. The jagged edge under my tongue for years. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice softened, but it wasn't the kind of softness I needed. It was condescending. "You're overthinking again. This is what you do. You spiral. You take one small moment and inflate it. Honestly, Rachel, you should be proud of Claire. You both turned out well in your own ways." That sentence. That sentence knocked the air right out of me. In our own ways. Like Claire was the novel and I was the footnote. "I'm not asking you to compare us," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to acknowledge that I've spent my life being the support act and I'm tired." Another pause. Then, flatly, "Well, maybe you're just not the type that needs the spotlight. And that's okay. Not everyone is." I stared at the wall, unable to respond. The call ended shortly after, with Evelyn reminding me to get some rest and not dwell. But I was done dwelling. The ache in my chest wasn't just from tonight. It was a lifetime of being edited out of my own family's story. And suddenly, it wasn't enough to be the quiet one, the helpful one, the afterthought. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But I knew this. Something had to change. Because if I didn't matter in that room, if I didn't matter to Evelyn, then I had to matter to myself. And I wasn't going to fade quietly anymore. Morning came without kindness. The sky outside my window was dull and gray, like even the sun couldn't be bothered. I padded into my home office, cradling a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My fingers hovered over my sketch pad before settling on a blank page. A clean slate. What a terrifying thing. I sat there in the silence, surrounded by my work, brand mood boards, campaign mock-ups, typography studies pinned to the cork wall. But none of it felt like me anymore. It was all things I'd done for someone else. Clients, employers, even Claire. I kept thinking about the empty chair at that dinner. The way it waited, quietly, like a reflection of me. present but unnoticed. There's a violence in invisibility, a slow, eroding kind. Evelyn had said I wasn't the type to need the spotlight. But I remembered being a kid, sketching dress designs on notebook paper, making little zines in high school, staying up late in college to build portfolios for competitions I never submitted. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I never thought I could be seen. That ended now. I flipped to a new page and scribbled 3 words in all caps, design something big. I didn't know what yet. An exhibit, a brand reinvention, maybe a gallery installation that married typography and spatial design. But it had to be mine. No wedding invites for Claire, no subtle logos buried in restaurant menus. I wanted my name on the wall, my work on display, my voice in the room. I closed my eyes and let the image form, Evelyn walking into a gallery, stopping in front of a massive installation stamped with sterling. Not Claire's wedding, not Claire's promotion. Me. Rachel Sterling. And not just Evelyn. Everyone. All the people who'd smiled politely when I mentioned my work, who'd reduced my career to a side gig, who saw designer and heard hobbyist. I wanted them to choke on their surprise, because I wasn't background anymore. I made a promise that morning. Not to win Evelyn's approval, not even to outshine Claire. I was done begging for table scraps of validation. No. I was going to build the damn table. The dream took root like fire under my skin. I started pulling out old sketches, collecting inspiration, bookmarking design contests, and gallery submission dates. I didn't have a full plan yet, but I had a mission: to step out of the shadows, to be impossible to ignore. And for once in my life, to stop apologizing for wanting more. By Wednesday, I had a proposal. I stayed up 2 nights straight designing mock-ups, case studies, projections. If I was going to do this, I wasn't going to wait around for permission. I walked into Halpern Creative with my laptop under my arm and a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt since college portfolio review day. Mr. Halpern sat behind his cluttered desk, surrounded by vintage movie posters and half-finished client proofs. He adjusted his glasses, peering over them like a skeptical librarian. "You look motivated," he said, eyebrows lifting. "I am," I replied, plugging my laptop into the conference screen. "I've got a proposal I'd like to walk you through. Something bold. Something that could put our name on the map." I launched into it. An immersive rebrand concept for an eco-sustainable clothing line launching in Brooklyn next season. I pitched physical packaging, digital identity, even a launch pop-up experience with interactive typography. He listened, nodding, fingers tapping together. Then came the inevitable. He said, drawing out the sound like a slow leak. "It's clever. Ambitious even. But risky. We've got a solid rhythm here. Logo refreshes, web kits. Reliable stuff. You sure this isn't a little too niche for our clientele?" "It's an emerging market," I pushed. "We could carve out a real name for ourselves if we do this right." He frowned. "I appreciate the initiative, Rachel." "I do. But our budget's tight, and clients don't always know what they want until they don't want it. Let's keep this on the back burner. Circle back after Q4. The screen went black. Just like that, my momentum flickered out. I nodded, lips tight. "Sure. Back burner. Back burner. Like the rest of my life." By the time I got home, I was already spiraling. The pitch had felt good, right even, but I could still hear Halpern's polite rejection echoing through my skull. I was making dinner when Evelyn called. "How's work?" she asked, her voice bright and insistent like a knife hidden in a bouquet. "Fine," I said, chopping garlic with more force than necessary. "I was just talking to Claire," she went on. "Did you hear? She got a new client account. Huge firm. They're flying her to Toronto next week. Good for her. You know," she continued, "if you ever get tired of all the freelance uncertainty, there's always marketing firms looking for coordinators. Steady paycheck. Benefits. Something more stable." I didn't answer, not immediately. I just stared at the garlic sizzling in the pan like it might explode. "I'm fine where I am," I said finally. Evelyn hummed. "Of course. Just thinking practically." After the call, I sat on the couch, my sketchpad untouched. Claire texted me a photo of her boarding pass with a smiling emoji. Underneath it, Evelyn had commented, "My little jet setter, I stared at the screen, throat tightening. No comment on my proposal. No curiosity about my plans. Just another reminder that Claire was the success story, and I was still the what? Background texture? I closed my phone. I knew this road would be hard. I just didn't expect to feel this alone so early on. And still, I wasn't turning back. Not yet. Marco always smelled like turpentine and espresso. We hadn't seen each other in months, but when he spotted me from across the cafe, he grinned like we'd just had lunch yesterday. "Sterling," he called, arms open like I was the returning hero from some creative war. "You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." That means either heartbreak or brilliant. "Little of both," I muttered, sliding into the booth. We sipped lattes like old times, our conversation bouncing from fonts we loved to clients we hated. I told him about the engagement dinner, the empty chair, the speech I left behind like a ghost note. He didn't laugh, didn't minimize it. "She made you feel invisible," he said quietly. "You don't come back from that by shrinking. You come back by making something so loud it burns." "Yeah, well, the match keeps going out." Marco leaned forward, pulled out his phone, and opened a webpage. "Then get new matches. There's a design competition happening downtown, sponsored by the City Arts Council. They're looking for bold. They're looking for soul. It's juried, gets press. You win this? People start talking about your work. Not just your skills, your vision." I stared at the page. Submission deadline, 1 month. "I can't do it," I said without thinking. "Why not?" "Work. Time. Life. And—" I hesitated. "Claire?" He guessed, not unkindly. "She asked me to design the wedding invite." "Of course she did," he said, sitting back. "Because you're the only one who ever says yes." I didn't argue. Because he was right. That night, I stared at my inbox. Claire had sent over a Pinterest board of soft neutrals and gold accents. "Simple, elegant, classic," she wrote. "Think understated glamour." Underneath that, Evelyn had chimed in. "Excited to see what you come up with, Rachel. You always do lovely work. Especially when it's for family. Especially when it's for family." I should have felt honored. Included. But instead, my heart dropped like a coin down a well. They noticed my work when it served them, when it made Claire shine. But when it was mine? When I dared to step beyond the guestbook table or the thank you card font? Silence. Still, I said yes. Again. Because part of me still wanted to be wanted, even if it was only as the invisible hand behind the sparkle. Later, I opened Marco's competition link again. I bookmarked it. Maybe I could do both, I told myself. Maybe this time would be different. But as I stared at Claire's wedding color palette and Evelyn's backhanded compliments, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. If I didn't fight for my voice now, I was going to lose it forever. I hit send on the submission at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding like I'd just confessed something I wasn't supposed to say out loud. Marco had stayed with me that night, pacing in the background, offering critiques that were sharp but loving. "Push the contrast," he'd muttered. This is the kind of layout that says you know who you are." We ordered takeout. We talked about typefaces like they were people. We believed, for one stupid, sparkling night, that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be seen. The waiting was worse than the work. Days passed. My inbox became a battlefield. I jumped at every notification. I kept checking the competition site like maybe the judges would knock on my door personally with good news. Then the email came. "Dear Rachel, thank you for your submission. That's never how it starts when it's good. While we appreciate your creative approach, your work was not selected for this year's showcase. Judges' comments: aesthetic has potential but lacks clarity of voice. Needs bolder decisions. Consider refining for future opportunities." I stared at it until the words stopped meaning anything. Lacks clarity of voice. Needs bolder decisions. Marco read it over my shoulder. "That's crap," he said immediately. "That's boilerplate. They didn't get it." But maybe they did. Maybe I wasn't bold. Maybe I was just background. Evelyn texted that evening. I hadn't told her about the competition. I didn't want to give her another angle to twist, but apparently, Claire had mentioned it during a family call. Sorry to hear your design didn't get picked. Rejection is part of the process, I suppose. That's why it's important to have something steady, darling. Something that lasts. Not everything has to be a passion project. Something that lasts. Like a wedding. Like a promotion. Like Claire. I didn't respond. Marco ordered wine and Thai food and tried to distract me with a documentary about brutalist architecture, but it was no use. The silence inside me was loud again, the kind that made my hands too heavy to hold a pencil. The next morning, I sat in my studio and stared at a blank canvas. The cursor blinked. So did I. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe I didn't have the voice I thought I did. Maybe I was chasing a ghost that never existed. I didn't open my laptop for 3 days. It sat there on the kitchen table like an unopened letter from someone I didn't want to hear from. Like it knew I'd failed. My sketchbook stayed shut, pens untouched. I moved through my apartment like a ghost, eating straight from takeout containers and pretending not to notice the emails piling up in my inbox. The competition rejection hurt more than it should have. I'd told myself it was a long shot, a stepping stone, not the finish line. But it hadn't just been a no, it had been confirmation that I was chasing something too big for someone like me. I kept hearing Evelyn's voice. That's why it's important to have something steady, looping in my head like a curse. Steady, practical, safe. Maybe she was right. Maybe all of this dream of recognition, of being seen, wasn't about creativity. Maybe it was just me begging to be acknowledged, the same way I did when I was 10, waving a crayon drawing in the living room while Claire showed off her spelling bee trophy. Was that all I was doing now? Just screaming into a void, hoping someone would clap? God, what if this wasn't about art at all? What if I wasn't a designer so much as a child who never grew out of needing her mother to say, "I'm proud of you"? I curled up on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Was any of this mine? The passion? The drive? It all blurred into a fog of confusion. Had I spent years building a career I loved? Or had I just constructed a cage that looked prettier than the one Evelyn had picked out for me? Because if I was honest, I didn't know anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to be a designer or if I just didn't want to be invisible. What if there was no difference? I watched old TV shows on mute. I deleted the draft for Claire's wedding invite design. I let my phone die and didn't bother plugging it in. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stopped. Stopped trying, stopped creating, stopped hoping. And in that quiet, deep, and sharp, I felt the part of me that had always kept going flicker. If this was the cost of wanting more, I wasn't sure I could afford it anymore. The email came just after midnight, subject line, "Loved your work. Interested in showing?" I almost deleted it, thought it was spam, but something. Maybe instinct, maybe just the stubborn part of me that hadn't completely died. Made me click. "Hi Rachel, my name is Lena. I help curate independent exhibitions at Studio Hollow on 3rd. One of our interns saw your design entry posted in the competition's public archive and passed it along. We were struck by your use of scale and quiet tension. We're putting together a mini showcase next month for emerging designers. Would you be open to participating?" I blinked. Read it again. And again. Then I forwarded it to Marco with nothing but a screenshot and a string of question marks. 3 seconds later, my phone rang. "Please tell me you're not about to overthink this," he said before I could say hello. "I'm not," I started. "You are. I can hear it." "Stop. Say yes. Right now. You didn't need their trophy, Rach. You needed this." I said, "Yes." Studio Hollow wasn't fancy. Exposed brick, paint-stained floorboards, a humming radiator that clicked like a metronome. But it felt real. Lena met me at the door, all smiles and sharp eyes. She moved through the gallery like she belonged to the space. Or maybe the space belonged to her. "You've got texture in your work," she said, flipping through my samples. "You let the silence speak. Not everyone knows how to do that." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like someone who made something worth noticing. The night of the show, the gallery was packed. Strangers leaned in to read the subtle text hidden in my layers, asked about my choices, touched the embossed paper like it was sacred. No one asked if I was married. No one asked what Claire was doing. No one called it a hobby. They called it art. One woman, older, stylish in a way that didn't care about trends, held up a piece and said, This feels like restraint and rebellion all at once. I wanted to cry. Instead, I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Marco brought wine. He grinned the whole time like he'd known this would happen. "You built something," he said later as we packed up. "You showed up for yourself." And for once, I believed him. It wasn't a billboard or a magazine spread or 1,000 likes online. It was 15 feet of wall, 2 hours of connection, and the quiet, searing knowledge that maybe I had something worth saying. Maybe I'd had it all along. The morning after the show, I woke up with swollen feet, an empty wine glass on the floor, and more unread DMs than I'd had in months. Designers I didn't know, people who'd seen photos, strangers asking if the pieces were for sale. I posted a few shots from the exhibit. Just a simple carousel, the gallery, the work, a quiet caption, grateful for space to be seen. Then, against my better judgment, I sent the same photos to our family group chat. No caption, just hoping. Claire responded first with a heart emoji. Then, "Looks cool, you've always been so artsy, love the font." I smiled, small and involuntary. It wasn't deep, but it was something. Then Evelyn chimed in. "Interesting concept. Lighting looks a bit harsh though, doesn't quite flatter the work. Have you thought about using more color?" "Just a suggestion. Still, nice that you're staying creative." "Nice that you're staying creative." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone. I sat in my kitchen and stared out the window, watching a pigeon wobble across the fire escape like it owned the place. The high I'd been floating on began to dip. Not plummet, just sag. Like Evelyn had pulled a thread and unraveled something delicate. Later that afternoon, she called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, sweetheart," she said breezily. "I saw your photos. Very avant-garde." "Thanks," I said. I kept my voice neutral. I wasn't giving her more than that. "You know, it reminds me a bit of that project Claire did in undergrad, you remember? The internship brochure for the hospital foundation. She got an award for that, didn't she?" There it was. The pivot, the comparison. Always back to Claire. I didn't reply. "She's thinking of doing a digital save the date," Evelyn continued. "I told her you'd probably have time to help now that the show's behind you." She was thrilled. I should have said no. Should have reminded her that I had projects of my own, that I wasn't here to be Claire's personal design assistant. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, "I'll think about it." "Wonderful," Evelyn said. "It's so nice when you girls work together. Claire always appreciates your little touches." Little touches. I hung up first. Then I opened the messages from strangers again. Read them slowly. The ones that said, "This moved me. Where can I see more? You made me feel something. Real things, from real people. Without qualifiers, without backhands, and that's when I saw it clearly." Evelyn's praise was only ever currency, given when I served a purpose, withheld when I tried to stand alone. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just turned my phone over and opened my sketchpad. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. I hadn't even finished my coffee when Claire's name flashed on my screen. Not a text. A video call. That alone told me something was wrong. I answered, still half asleep, hair in a messy bun. Claire's face was blotchy, eyes red. "He ended it," she said. No preamble, no pause. "What?" I blinked, trying to catch up. "Ethan, he said he couldn't do it. The wedding, the future, all of it, he just left." I froze. Claire, put together, polished, always in control, was unraveling in real time, her voice cracked. "He didn't even give me a reason, Rosh. Just said he felt like it wasn't right anymore." "Jesus, Claire," I breathed, the shock sharp and immediate. "I'm so sorry, I feel humiliated." She whispered, "Everyone knows. Mom's already calling it a pause like this is some PR spin we can manage." That sounded exactly like Evelyn. "I'm here," I said, because I didn't know what else to offer. "Whatever you need." And of course, within the hour, Evelyn was on the phone. "Rachel, darling," she began, already in campaign mode, "Claire's devastated. It's all hands on deck right now." "All hands?" I asked, tone flat. "She'll need help contacting vendors, returning gifts, updating guests, maybe even some emotional support. You're so good at those things," You've always had such patience. I closed my eyes. Of course. Also, she continued, Claire mentioned you'd started designing the wedding invitations. Could you shift that into a postponement notice? Something tasteful but not too final. We don't want to make it dramatic. I didn't say anything. Rachel? I heard you, I said. My voice was soft, but it cut like glass. She paused. You're not upset, are you? No, I replied. I'm just wondering if you've even asked Claire what she wants before planning the damage control tour. Evelyn exhaled, sharp and clipped. She needs stability right now. And we both know you're the one who handles these things best. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, Claire called again. Her voice was smaller. I don't know who I am without him, she said. I wanted to say something profound. Instead, I just sat with her in the silence. Sometimes, presence was all you had to offer. But even as I held space for her grief, I felt mine creeping in, quiet, unwelcome. The ache of being needed but never chosen. The exhaustion of being everyone's emotional safety net. And for the first time, I wondered, if I stopped answering, would they still see me? Or would I disappear entirely? I didn't know the answer, but I was getting closer to wanting to find out. I stopped answering calls, not just Evelyn's, Claire's too, Marco's. Even the gallery assistant who emailed asking if I'd consider another installation. I read the messages, heard the voicemails pile up, but I couldn't move. For days, I lived in bed, buried beneath blankets and the weight of every version of myself I had tried to be. The helper, the peacemaker, the talented one but not talented enough, the good sister, the backup plan. None of it felt real anymore. None of it felt mine. I let the dishes stack in the sink. I let the light bulb in the hallway stay burned out. I let the mail sit unopened because what was it going to bring? Another request? Another reminder? My sketchpad lay face down on the floor. I couldn't even look at it. What was the point of making something beautiful if no one cared unless it served them? I kept hearing Evelyn's voice, so practical, so efficient, cutting through everything. We all have roles, Rachel. But what if I was tired of mine? What if I didn't want to be the sturdy one, the background melody, the person who made things easier for everyone else? Did they even know who I was outside of what I could do for them? Late one night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, clutching the edge of the sink like it might hold me together. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, pale, unbrushed hair falling into my face. I didn't recognize her. And worse, I didn't miss her. I crawled back into bed and wrapped myself in silence. No tears, just numb. It was then, sometime around 3 a.m., that the image returned. The empty chair. It wasn't just a moment anymore. It had become something else. A symbol. A monument. Me, standing there with that folded speech clutched in my hand, every word unwritten in the eyes of the people I loved. I realized something then. Something sharp. I hadn't walked out because I was angry. I walked out because I was vanishing. Because I'd spent my entire life showing up for a family that never truly saw me. Not the real me, just the function I filled. And in that chair, I'd left more than a speech. I'd left every version of myself I wasn't willing to carry anymore. But here's the thing about ghosts. They don't rest until the living remember them. And I was done haunting myself. I woke up with sunlight on my face and an unfamiliar stillness in my chest. Not peace, exactly. Not joy. But something sharper. Something alive. Resolve. I pulled myself out of bed like I was peeling off a second skin, one made of guilt, obligation, fear. I showered. I dressed like someone who had somewhere to be even though I didn't. Not yet. Then I stood in front of the mirror, looked myself dead in the eye, and said it out loud. You're not waiting anymore. It felt like a dare. I made coffee, strong and black. I sat at my desk and opened a fresh document. Title: The Quiet That Roars. I didn't know what it would be yet. An exhibit, an installation, maybe a blend of digital and physical experience. But it would be mine. No compromise, no edits from Evelyn. No approval necessary. I started listing venues, independent galleries, pop-up co-ops, community art houses. I opened a new folder on my desktop and dragged in every piece I'd ever loved but never shared. Work I'd deemed too emotional or too abstract to pitch. The kind of design that wasn't about sales or clients or wedding invitations, the kind that told the truth. I texted Marco, "Need studio time. Have a project. No compromises this time." He replied in 2 seconds, "Hell yes, I'm in." Then I opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was the original, water-stained print of the speech I'd never given. The one I'd left on that damn chair. I unfolded it. Read it slowly. "Claire, you've always been the light, but maybe I was never meant to reflect you. Maybe I'm my own constellation." I didn't finish reading. I didn't have to. I knew what came next. That night, I walked downtown, the city buzzing around me, not knowing or caring who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I liked that. I didn't need anyone to see me in order to exist. But they would see me. Not as Claire's sister. Not as Evelyn's afterthought. Not as the woman who designs little touches for other people's moments. They would see Rachel Sterling. Because I was going to show them. The first thing I did was claim the white wall. At Marco's studio, the back corner wall had always been a tangle of unfinished work and old flyers. I cleared it without asking. Hung test prints with thumbtacks. Taped quotes in black marker above them. Lines I'd whispered to myself in the dark. Words Evelyn would call melodramatic, and Marco called brave. "This is the sharpest I've seen you," he said one afternoon, watching me layer textures over a screen print. "It's like something snapped back into place. It's like I finally stopped asking for permission," I said. We spent late nights with cheap Chinese takeout and loud music, arguing over font pairings and gallery layouts. I mocked up invitations, not for Claire's wedding, but for my show. An independent exhibit, my name on the flyer, my voice in every frame. The quiet that roars. A design statement turned confession. 1 week, 1 night, 1 chance. Lena from Studio Hollow responded within 24 hours. "If you want the space, it's yours. I'll push another artist too next month. Yours feels urgent." Urgent. That word stuck with me. I made a spreadsheet, budget, deadlines, vendors. Marco helped me mock up lighting plans. I rehearsed talking points like I was prepping for a TED Talk. I even booked a friend's photographer to document the night. Each step felt like laying bricks under my own feet. Back home, Evelyn left a voicemail. "Just touching base. Claire's thinking of moving the wedding to spring. She's still not ready, but she asked if you'd mind updating the save the dates when she finalizes the venue. No rush. Hope you're well." No mention of the gallery. No mention of the work I'd been sharing online. Nothing. Her silence wasn't just ignorance, it was a strategy. As if by not acknowledging it, she could will it out of existence. But I wasn't disappearing this time. I pinned the voicemail transcript on my corkboard under a printed quote from my own design. "I used to build things for people who never looked up. Now I build to be unmissable." This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was about reclamation. One font, one frame, one story at a time. The smell of roasted rosemary chicken filled Evelyn's townhouse like it was meant to soothe everything she refused to say out loud. I hadn't wanted to come. But Claire had asked, gently, almost pleading. "Just dinner," she said, "no pressure, I miss you." So I came. Out of obligation. Out of a dull, leftover hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would notice I was changing. I sat at the edge of the dining table, my plate half full, my attention even less. Claire sat across from me, eyebrows furrowed with something like concern. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "Like, not just tonight. Lately." I shrugged, cutting into a piece of chicken I didn't want. "Been busy." "With your show?" There was a flicker in her voice, curiosity maybe. Maybe even pride. But before I could answer, Evelyn swooped in like a storm front. "Honestly, Rachel, I've been meaning to ask. Why all this sudden focus on showcasing? Isn't your work usually more behind the scenes? You've always been so good at supporting roles. This feels different." It was said with a smile. The kind she wore like a weapon. I set my fork down. Claire looked between us, eyes narrowing. "Mom, come on." "What?" Evelyn said, all feigned innocence. "I'm just surprised. It's very visible for Rachel." And there it was. The truth behind her tone. Visible. Like, that was a bad thing. Maybe I don't want to be behind the scenes anymore, I said, sharper than I intended. Maybe I never did. Evelyn blinked, as if I'd said something impolite at a tea party. Claire leaned forward. Are you mad at me? The question caught me off guard. What? You've been distant. Is it because of the wedding, or the breakup, or Mom? It's not about you, I said, even though I wasn't sure that was true. It feels like it is. Evelyn made a disapproving noise. Rachel, you've always been sensitive, but this new detachment, it's starting to feel hostile. We're family. That used to mean something to you. It still does, I wanted to scream. That's why it hurts so damn much. Instead, I stood up. I have a show in 2 weeks. I'd love if you came. But I'm not asking for approval. I'm not asking for anything, actually. Claire's face fell. Rach? But I was already gathering my coat. I'm done performing gratitude for being tolerated, I said quietly. And then I left. Evelyn didn't call after me. Claire didn't follow. The silence said everything. The gallery hummed with people, strangers, critics, fellow artists, friends. A soft amber light coated the walls, pulling depth from the layered textures of my work. The quiet that roars stretched across the entrance in matte foil lettering, catching the light just enough to whisper. Marco clinked glasses with someone near the installation while keeping an eye on me like a bodyguard who doubled as a hype man. They're here, he murmured, motioning subtly with his chin. I followed his gaze. Evelyn. Claire. They stood side by side in the doorway, surveying the space like it belonged to someone else. Evelyn's expression was unreadable. Claire's was softer, touched with something like awe. I didn't move toward them. I let the work speak first. A wall of oversized prints, muted colors, threaded text, broken type. One piece featured a single empty chair, dead center. Under the words, "Absence speaks louder than applause." People paused there, quiet. A woman placed her hand on her chest. Another whispered. That hit. Evelyn stopped in front of it, brows knitting. It's striking, she offered, voice low but audible. Maybe a bit on the nose. Marco, never one for restraint, chimed in. Sometimes the truth needs to be obvious. Claire laughed softly behind her hand. I stepped up to the front of the room when the curator gave me a nod. A small mic in hand, a podium beside me. Everyone turned. Every eye found mine. For once, I didn't flinch. Thank you all for coming, I began, voice even, but sure. This collection was born from silence. From years of showing up and wondering if I was ever really in the room. From being the one who sets the table but never gets a seat. A murmur moved through the crowd. I once wrote a speech, I continued. For a dinner that was never about me. I left it on a chair and walked away. Tonight I'm reading that speech, not for anyone's permission, but because this space, these walls, are mine. I unfolded a fresh copy of the speech. My voice didn't shake. Claire, you've always been light, and for a long time I thought my role was to reflect you, to soften, to dim, to support. But I've learned that light doesn't belong to one person. We all carry it. And mine? It burns quietly but fiercely, and I'm done hiding it behind someone else's shine. I looked at Evelyn. This is for the ones who felt unseen in rooms they helped build. For the ones who leave chairs empty because they're tired of being invisible. I see you. I see me. And we are enough. The room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that wraps around you like warmth. The kind that means something. I saw Evelyn's face, tight, conflicted, blinking like she'd missed a step in her own story. Claire's eyes were glassy. She didn't clap at first. Then she did. Slow. Real. I stepped back as the applause softened, heart pounding not from fear, but from finally taking up space. The gallery had thinned out just enough to let the air settle. People milled, whispered, took final photos of the installations. I stood near the back wall, jacket off, wine glass in hand, pulse slowly returning to earth. Evelyn approached like she was walking onto a stage, still composed, still curated. She glanced at the wall with the empty chair, then back at me. Well, she said, folding her arms. It certainly drew a reaction. I took a slow sip of wine. That was the point. She nodded slowly, as if deciding whether to scold or congratulate. You've always had Potential. I just wish you didn't feel the need to frame it as a rebellion. I met her eyes. It wasn't a rebellion, Mom. It was a reclamation. Her lips parted, but I didn't give her room to speak. Not this time. I'm not a reflection of Claire. I'm not your creative helper. I'm not going to shrink to fit whatever narrative makes this easier for you. That ends tonight. She looked at me like I was speaking a language she'd never heard. Rachel? No, I said, gently but firmly. I don't need your validation. I never did. I just wanted to believe I mattered to you outside of what I could do for everyone else. The silence between us wasn't cruel. It was honest. Maybe for the first time ever. Claire appeared at my side, quiet, her voice low. That was brave, Rach. The speech. All of it. I didn't expect her to say more, but she did. I used to be jealous of you, she admitted. Because you had something real. Not just resumes and rings and whatever Mom called impressive. You had soul. And I was too busy performing to notice. That caught me off guard. Why are you telling me now? Because I didn't know how to say it before. And because I want to stop pretending. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, not as roles but as people. Finally. Marco came over, grinning. So, think you'll be able to walk through a room without causing an emotional epiphany now? I laughed, the sound catching in my chest. No promises. Later, as I packed up the last of the prints, I paused in front of the empty chairpiece. It no longer felt like grief. It felt like truth. And I was done asking people to look. Now, they had to see. The city was colder than I remembered, the kind of sharp air that wakes you up, clean and immediate. I walked with my hands in my coat pockets, scarf tight around my neck, not to hide, but to feel the warmth I'd made for myself. I passed the building where Halpern Creative still buzzed behind its frosted glass. I paused for just a second, watching a junior designer rush past the lobby, headphones in, coffee in hand, bright-eyed and already exhausted. I remembered that version of myself. Always early, always eager, always hoping someone would say, "You belong here." I didn't feel bitterness, not even regret, just distance. I kept walking. My phone buzzed, an email from a local arts council asking if I'd be open to mentoring younger designers. I smiled, not because they wanted me, but because I knew I could say yes or no, and either way, I'd still be whole. Everything felt quieter now. Not the kind of silence I used to fear, the heavy kind that made me feel erased, but the soft kind, like clean paper. Like a blank wall waiting. I'd filled the gallery. I'd said the words. I'd drawn the lines with my own hands and let the world see the cracks I'd once tried to hide. And I didn't vanish. I emerged. No applause could replace that. No praise from Evelyn, no call from Claire, no gallery review. The truest thing was in me now. Rooted. I crossed the street, wind brushing against my cheek, and thought of the chair again. The one I'd left behind. Only now, it wasn't empty. It was mine. And I'd finally taken my seat. The room wasn't large, just a side gallery with folding chairs, a few spotlights, and free wine sweating in plastic cups. But it was full. People leaned forward as I took the mic, not because they owed me attention, but because they wanted to hear what I had to say. I'd been invited to speak at a panel titled, "Designing from the Margins." A few months ago, I might have cringed at the label. Now, I understood it. I embraced it. Margins were where I'd lived. Now, they were where I created. I adjusted the mic. My fingers didn't shake. "Hi," I said, and the crowd stilled. "My name is Rachel Sterling. I'm a designer, a sister, a daughter. And for a long time, I thought I had to earn my space by being useful, by staying small, by making things pretty but quiet. But I've learned that invisibility isn't humility, it's erasure." A hum moved through the chairs. People nodded. "I want to share something I wrote a while ago. I never got to read it, not when I first wrote it, not when I needed to. But I'm ready now." I unfolded the same sheet of paper. The corners were softer now, well handled, but the ink still held. "I once wrote this for my sister's engagement dinner. I left it behind. Tonight, I read it for me." I took a breath. "Claire, you've always been light. But maybe I was never meant to reflect you. Maybe I'm my own constellation. Maybe I was never background. I was just waiting for the right frame. A quiet settled in the room like reverence. I no longer designed to please. I designed to say something. To take up space. To name the parts of myself I used to bury beneath politeness and roles and expectations. I looked up. And if you've ever felt like your voice was too soft, too strange, too off script, I hope you know, it still counts. You still count. The applause this time was gentle but solid. Not explosive, not loud, just certain. I stepped off the stage and into a room that had not been built for me, but had opened anyway, not because I'd begged, but because I'd arrived. And finally, I wasn't asking to be seen. I was. The light in the new studio spilled in wide and golden, catching dust in the air like glitter. The walls were still blank, the floors unfinished, but the space hummed with possibility. I stood on a ladder, paint splattered and sweating, holding the final piece in my hands, a wooden sign I'd carved and brushed myself. Clean serif letters, no frills, just weight. Sterling. I hung it above the door. No designs by. No creative services. No subtitle to soften the declaration, just the name. Mine. Behind me, the room echoed with the shuffle of chairs, the buzz of another artist hanging lighting fixtures, someone laughing in the back as music crackled from an old speaker. It wasn't just mine. I'd built it to be shared. A place where voices like mine could grow without shrinking. I stepped down from the ladder and looked around. There was still so much to do. Walls to paint, tables to build, projects to plan. But I wasn't overwhelmed, I was grounded. I ran my hand over the worn wood of the windowsill, thinking about all the versions of me that had stood in other rooms, other homes, waiting for someone to invite her in. Make her visible. Say she mattered. Now, I didn't need an invitation. I'd made my own doorway. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. A message from Marco, first client meeting here Monday. You ready, boss? I smiled. Not because I was ready in every way, but because I knew readiness was just another form of trust. And finally, I trusted myself. I walked to the center of the space, turned slowly in a circle, and breathed it in. Every story, every silence, every empty chair that once haunted me had led to this. Not the end. The beginning.